It's so great to have you. We are starting our coffee break with neighbor Patti, and I'm excited to introduce everyone to the executive director of FairVote Illinois. Andrew Szilva joins us, and a lot of people are going to have questions. I think people are hearing a little bit about what ranked choice voting is, and we're going to talk about that. But I want to let people know the reason that I'm doing this. Many of you know that I am passionate about connecting people with their elected officials. We know about the presidential elections, our mayoral elections. When the governor's race is up, everyone's engaged. But it's the people on the local level in particular that I always try to connect folks with, let them know who their state reps are, their state senators. I encourage them to go to openstates.org, because a lot of times people don't even know who those electeds are. So this is something that caught my attention on social media a few months ago, because there is this push in several states, and actually 2 states have passed legislation about ranked choice voting. And it's a little bit complicated. So that's why I wanted to have Andrew on to explain what that is. But first, I want to know who you are. Andrew, where are you from?
Yeah, so I grew up in Illinois in the south suburbs, Calumet City. I guess growing up, I went to Thornwood High School in South Holland, University of Illinois, went to grad school at UCLA. And so I moved around the country a little bit, was living in LA for grad school, then Princeton, where I did my last 2 years of grad school. In New Jersey, I lived in New York and Kentucky, and then back in Chicago for the last 7 years or so, and plan to stay here.
Really? So first, as a fellow Illini, ILL, what did you study? Oh, there you go. What did you study at U of I?
So I did my degrees in chemistry. I did a lot of math, physics, and chemistry.
Okay.
As an undergrad. Yeah, I was a huge nerd growing up, very quiet, straight A high school student type guy. Did my research as an undergrad, starting as a sophomore. So then went to UCLA, where I did theoretical chemistry. So I wrote computer simulations of small molecules, which was super cool work.
Okay. It sounds like it.
Yeah. So science is definitely my background. It's kind of, I think, who I am was at my core. I was always questioning everything and how things work and how do we know how it's working. That somewhat led me eventually to ranked choice voting as well. So,
well, okay, and a lot of people are going to go, nope, I'm not seeing the connection there. But it sounds like you enjoy making sense of things that seem too complicated to put together otherwise.
Yeah, I like evidence-based reasoning. The scientific method makes sense for good reason. It's how do we know something's working? How do we test it? Right. And that shouldn't be any different with policy. And we could have metrics to say, what do we think is going to happen? Can we predict it? Can we introduce policy? And then can we test it and see if it's working? And if it is, great. If not, how do we tweak things? And I believe the country is really set up well for this. We have states that could do their own little mini experiments. We have local municipalities that could do that, and so it's really I think the obvious way of doing things to say what's actually happening, what are we measuring, what results can we see.
Well, when you say that it's obvious, then it must be frustrating when folks get a little bit defensive, because there is a lot of, this is the way things have always been done, this is the way we do them. That's my sense of things. Is that yours?
Oh, absolutely. And that's one of the big barriers to something like ranked choice voting, which I'm bringing it back to. But it's that we hear either one is that it's too complicated, which we're finding that it's not. When people realize what it is, they could rank choices 1, 2, 3. Or why aren't we already doing this? Right? Like, why? We're the way we're doing things must be the right way of doing it, because that's how we've been doing it. And so that's frustrating, because it's saying, wait a second, we know things are broken. We know everyone complains about politics. We know it's super polarized. We know, people don't feel represented by the government. So all these things seem broken. So it's like, why are you saying, let's keep doing the same thing and hope it just magically fixes itself.
You bring up a great point. That's the biggest reason I wanted to have a conversation with you, is this lack of faith in government. And I get it, especially in Illinois. People are incredibly cynical about our politicians, about government. And yet, people are consumed with conversations every single day about their political beliefs. And they continue to be influenced by advertisements, by mailers, and that, they don't realize, and that's not, it's hard because there's so much noise, not realizing that often those mailers, that advertisement is paid for by the very people that they're always screaming about, always frustrated with. The people who have a lot of money, have a lot of power, want to consolidate that and continue to do so through elections. And this is a way for people to have a more of a voice, isn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, right now we have two parties on the ballot typically, and so it's really, it changes the conversation as well. So even just having a third party in there, suddenly it's not saying I side right or like immigration policy, no immigration policy, whatever it might be. It's not a yes, no anymore. It's suddenly, can we get into the details of issues, and then can we, start thinking about why we believe what we believe. And hopefully it's not just because I got the flyer that told me what to
right,
how to vote, right? Hopefully it's getting a little bit more into the nuance of an issue to say, it's not, do we raise or lower taxes? It's what is the appropriate rate, right? Should be the question.
Right. Taxes aren't going anywhere, but how do you have a stronger voice in that? How are you able to have vote for somebody, or really have the opportunity to have your thoughts, your, expectations of what taxation should be represented and reflected?
Mm-hmm.
So how, first, okay, so you go from the University of Illinois to UCLA, you're studying chemistry, and then you go to, so what did you study at Princeton? Still chemistry, or now do you make the switch?
Yeah, I was a visiting student researcher there. So I spent 2 years in the applied math department at Princeton, which was really, the type of work I did was writing computer code to calculate properties of small molecules. And there were lots of applications potentially of this, where you could scale it up a little bit. You could start using it for drug design and cancer research, and really anything with organic molecules, if we want to get nerdy about it, which were, paint adhesives and things like that. So I thought really, really exciting work.
And that, again, because it's math-based models that you have, it does inform when you're looking at election results, outcomes, predictions. We have all these different groups. I guess the big one is the Nate Silver group is always trying to, have all these formulas. And you're trying to drill down to what is the cause of how we ended up here. And it's a lot. And I'm surprised. I was looking at the article that came out about a month ago with a lot of different, sort of comments and statements that I think would probably be confusing for some folks, because the article talks about the importance of it, and then, has a couple of things that you're like, I'm not sure if that's the way I would phrase it. But I saw that you have Representative Jaime Andrade on board, and Senator Laura Murphy, and several others in our General Assembly. I have to think that incumbents wouldn't necessarily want to change the way things are. Again, that's something that might be a threat to a lot of people. It's like asking a legislator to pass legislation to lower their income, or for term limits. Those are the kinds of things that seem like pretty big lifts. What kind of progress, and how did you make that progress with legislators?
Yeah, so we have a bill, as you mentioned, in both the House with Jaime Andrade is the sponsor, and in the Senate, SB 1785, which is the bill that Senator Laura Murphy introduced. It's for statewide elections, so governor, lieutenant governor, treasurer, comptroller, all the members of the General Assembly, which would use ranked choice voting. And Laura Murphy is a big proponent of this. She's the sponsor of the bill. She's actually working on an amendment with the bill with us, which is really exciting, to include presidential elections, which would be a huge win, because that's what everyone thinks of when they think of voting, like voting for president. And really what she's a big fan of, and we're a big fan of, is extending it to primaries as well. And so the thought with that is if you're an incumbent, you're worried about getting primaried in many cases. You're worried about losing that election. And sometimes that happens strategically because people run a candidate to split votes. And
yeah,
you don't
like that. Yeah.
You don't quite get, the plurality, the most votes because, someone similar to you is put on the ballot basically 4 votes away. And we're told this at every election, even, I think of it as even in a general election, you hear every election cycle, like, don't vote for the Green Party guy, you're going to pull votes away from the Democrat, or don't vote for the Libertarian, you're going to pull votes away from the Republican. And so that's sort of the idea was sometimes incumbents actually think, wait, this actually strengthens my chance, like it strengthens my chance of getting reelected, assuming I should be the one reelected, right? So
right.
As long as they're comfortable with their position, it really gives them a strong benefit.
Yeah, because it does seem as though incumbents, in particular in Illinois, the representatives are elected every 2 years. So almost immediately, so they were just sworn in January, and then petitions start going out in August, at the end of August, early September. So that's not a lot of room for them to actually do their jobs. They're always worried, it seems to me, about getting reelected and making people, appeasing people. And look, I get it. When you're a politician, you have a lot of different interest groups, and you also have a wide range of ideas and perspectives in your community, the constituents. There's not, I don't know of, at least in my neighborhood, of any other community than the Northwest side of Chicago that has such a wide range of political beliefs and where that's grounded. So how do you explain it to people when you're calling and putting out tweets and things like that? How do you explain to folks that what ranked choice? Because you said you can just put them in order 1, 2, and 3. That still they're like, okay, what am I? Okay, the ballot's going to have 3 names, and then I have to put check the boxes on in different orders. Okay.
Yeah. So in general, we say, when you go to vote today, you go to the ballot box, you select a single candidate. With ranked choice voting, it's an upgrade to the way we vote, where instead of selecting a single candidate, you rank your choices, first choice, second choice, third choice, all the way down the list, as many as you like, in any order you prefer. And then when we count the votes, we only look at everyone's first choice. And in order for a candidate to win, someone has to have 50% or more of the votes. And if that happens, election's over, just like it is today, right? That's it. However, if a candidate doesn't have a majority, if they don't have at least 50%, then we do an instant runoff. We eliminate the last place candidate. And if I voted for that last place candidate, my vote is transferred to my second choice instead. And then we just keep repeating this process until we have a winner, somebody with 50% or more of the vote.
Okay.
And so yeah, and what it does is it ensures that whoever is the winner is supported, at least in part by a majority of the constituents.
But people would say, well, a simple majority, they got more votes than anybody else. That seems fair and enough. Why is it more important to have 50 plus 1? Why is a majority of the population a better way to go?
Yes. So there's lots of reasons for this, right? So one of the big things is that even it changes the dynamics. So as a candidate, there's an incentive right now to appeal to my base, to say, I'm going to get those votes and I'm going to win the election that way. With ranked choice voting, there's much more of an incentive to appeal to a broad portion of the population. You want to get votes from everywhere because even if you're not someone's first choice, you want to be their second choice or their third choice because that's what it might require in order to actually win the election. So that's one piece of it in itself that's reason enough, but it changes the dynamics of the race itself. It allows us to have more choices on the ballot for a voter, which is really great. And it causes the elections to be more civil. So as I'm running for office, right, it doesn't serve me nearly as well as it does today to trash my opponent, right? Because I kind of want those people to choose me second if I'm not their first choice. And so what we're seeing is in place that use ranked choice voting. There's still some mudslinging, but much less of it. And there's even joint campaigning sometimes where I'm similar to another candidate. I'll release an ad with them saying, you know, I want to be your first choice, but if you don't want to choose me first, choose her first. And if she's not your your first choice, that's great. Then make me your second, right? And so those type of ads are almost unreal when you see them for the first time, but they make so much sense. There's so many candidates that are closely aligned, and they could do this now. They could say, like, either one of us would make a great nominee. And so
that sounds like a fantasy land that you're talking about, where you would have candidates that would say, because there's so much money that goes into a campaign. So why would somebody try to do all that fundraising? Does that, help people who maybe don't have as much money throw their hat in the ring? When you say encourage more people to run, is that part of it?
Well, part of it is it encourages people to run because there's actually a shot at it, right? Right now, there's such high barriers for a third party to run for office, right? And as I already suggested earlier, we're all used to the don't spoil the election, don't vote for, the third party candidate. You're going to pull votes and elect, right? You're going to pull, votes away from the Democrat, help the Republican get elected, or away from the Republican, help the Democrat get elected. So if nothing else, it allows us to state our preference, and we can see those results to say, wow, this candidate who is running on an issue I really care about, the environment or healthcare or whatever it might be, they're getting 12% of the vote. Like that's important and changes the dynamics of our politics just in itself. But then as I'm running, if I'm similar to another candidate, I could support them, right? And say, yeah, I know we're running against each other, but if I'm not elected, she would make a terrific candidate. Like, why can I not say that today, right? And we align on a lot of issues. And yes, we have our differences, but we align mostly. So please, select her number 2 and me number 1, or her number 1 and me number 2. And it's really an amazing dynamic that plays out.
Well, so there are two states. There are 2 states that currently have ranked choice voting. Is that Maine? Oh, go ahead.
Oh yeah. So there's 2 states that do it statewide, Maine, and it just passed in Alaska. But there's at least 29 cities in the U.S., including some really big ones: San Francisco, Oakland, Minneapolis. New York City is using it right now. They're going to be using it for the mayor race in New York. So, lots of cities using it, and then 2 states that use it statewide.
And you mentioned that what you're seeing are these instances where candidates are, teaming up and things like that. That's what you're seeing in those 29 cities, and in the 2, well, at least so far in Maine, people are reacting.
So we've seen that in the race for governor in Maine, and we've seen it in San Francisco and in Oakland. There's some really, I find them very inspiring joint campaign ads, right? And so, we're seeing it in those places that run ranked choice voting, and it doesn't happen. It doesn't necessarily have to happen,
right?
But it's really inspiring to see that
it's possible.
That's possible. It's possible that we're talking about who makes the best candidate, what are the issues people care about, and how do we change the conversation to that, instead of that person is awful and they're evil or they're
right. Well,
right.
And I think, right. And that seems like a better way to filter some of that out. And Chicagoans, I think, would probably recognize this as an opportunity lost in our mayoral race, when we had, was it 11, 12 candidates? And, then you have to have an expensive runoff. Had they been able to do it, because that first election wasn't a primary, that was the general election. And because we had so many candidates, everyone threw their hat in the ring once Rahm Emanuel announced that he was not going to run for re-election, and everybody was off to the races. And had we had the opportunity to go, okay, well, I like some things about Tony Preckwinkle or Lori Lightfoot or Susana Mendoza, we might have been able to take care of it that day, wouldn't we?
Yeah, and in that election, mean, I guess I don't know the exact number. I thought it was 14 candidates.
It might be.
But Lori Lightfoot had about 17% of the vote. Frank Winkle had 16%, and they were the top two and went into a runoff.
Right.
And so I have nothing against either candidate, great, right? But there's something that feels very wrong where, about a third of the voters picked the top two that went on, and then we have a runoff with just those two, right? There's something that just isn't quite like, maybe they were the top two preferred candidates, maybe, right? But we could know by using ranked choice voting that we know they are, and we get the most preferred out of that group. And so, it just seems like a real no-brainer way of doing things to get the most preferred candidate.
Well, and here's what people who maybe aren't familiar with it, right, or are trying to imagine it, because again, this is the way things have always been done, and it's very hard to change. They would say, well, yeah, well, they got the top two in the general election, and in the runoff, Lightfoot had a resounding victory. She won in every ward that sells soda, because they were able to use, that was something that was in the most recent memory, was Preckwinkle putting on a soda tax that was obviously very poorly received. And so, when you think about it in your terms, when it was only 28% of the population actually chose those two, because there was another example, and you might have been living somewhere else, in 2014 for our gubernatorial race. Governor Pritzker, Governor Rauner, Bruce Rauner, only got about 3% of the votes in the primary, because only 16%, 3% of the population, 16% of the population even bothered to show up for the primary, because people are that cynical, or they're just not that engaged when it comes to primaries.
Yeah, exactly. And so often in many districts, governor is something that's a little bit more highlighted, and mayor is a little bit more highlighted. When you look at the General Assembly, oftentimes the primary is the election. There's so many general elections where at that point, we already know if it's a Democratic district, the Democrats winning, and if it's a Republican district, the Republicans winning, because it's just, gerrymandered that way as well, which is a separate issue.
Yes.
But so the primary is where it all happens, and there's so few people who vote in those primaries. It's really concerning that the people getting elected are getting elected by a minuscule portion of the population. And so it's no wonder that, there's these incentives that you don't necessarily have to represent the people who elected you, because in many ways they're not electing you.
Right. And you are just going, and it's not that we don't have legislators that will reach out to everybody. But when you do have a neighborhood, a community that has a broad range of views, opinions, backgrounds, you do want somebody who is able to talk to everybody, that never says something like, well, I'm never going to talk to that group. Well, that group is, a part of the community as well. And so, right now we have legislators who are able to close the door on a lot of voices. And that's part of what you guys strive for, is to make people feel empowered in their government. Is that how do you explain that to folks? How are we more empowered? Aside from, not getting to 50+1.
Yeah. Yes. So, a general sense in the country, both at the local level and state level and national level, is that our elected officials aren't representing our interests, right? And it doesn't matter what group you talk to. This is a feeling across the board, and there's reason to think that, right? There's a lot of problems that just persist for decades, and we're like, why has nothing been done for years and years on this issue? And so the whole point of trying to elect people in this manner is that you get representation in government that's a better representation of the voters, and hopefully that leads to a focus on the voters' needs and wants, and rather than what it takes today to get elected, which is often making sure you're able to fundraise and get your ear is often tied to different special interest groups.
Oh,
and
no doubt.
that's a shame.
So Absolutely. Go ahead. I think AOC's
Yeah.
talked about that, like when she does her fundraising, she talks about how, because they have these, what they call like the system or the plan, or, this different, these sort of, spoken and unspoken rules of how you run for office. You've got to, spend 2 hours a day making phone calls to get more money for your campaign on days when you are in session. Or, I think she was saying it was 4 hours a day of just calling and asking for money. And the people who have money are the ones that want to have influence, rather than the people who should have influence are the voters.
Yeah. And then even the, like, as a whole, when you look at, let's say, Congress, when you're not appealing to just a portion, your base, and suddenly you're appealing to a more broader portion, it's a lot easier as a group to compromise and to come up with joint solutions, because you were elected with this interest in mind of a just border process, and then we're not just saying nope, it's this left or right, or we're actually working towards something probably more in the middle, but something that actually works and can pass, and we could test out and make progress. So it's both on an individual elected official level, but more so sort of as a whole. You have this more, it creates more of a incentive to um, compromise and to work towards the goal of fulfilling your constituents' needs.
When you became the executive director of FairVote, I mean, how long have you been? First, I should ask, how long have you been the executive director of FairVote?
So we became incorporated last year in May or June time. So since that time.
Okay.
So um, yep.
And
And
what?
so at
Go ahead.
so yeah, at the we started working on this more towards the beginning of last year, where we got the pieces in place. FairVote as an organization, as a group of youth volunteers, has been around for a few years now, and so inspired a lot by Maine, and their push to get, not only their push, but that they got ranked choice voting statewide. There were some volunteers who said, "Yeah, this makes a lot of sense. Why are we not doing it here?" And so,
Well, that brings it. Well, let's start here then. Why did Maine do that? How did they move in that direction and become successful at passing that legislation?
yeah. So Maine has a heavy, I would say, a relatively heavy independent population, and so when a independent runs for office, what would sometimes happen is that they split votes from one side or the other, and the least preferred candidate out of the three would get elected. And so it was one of these things where we're just like, wait a second, this is happening too often. Let's make a push for it. And yeah, they did, and it seems to really work out. They did use it even in the presidential election back in November.
And
So
for the 29 cities that succeeded in passing this for ranked choice voting in their municipalities, how were they successful? I mean, was it the same thing where you have people who are frustrated and cynical about it, and you're able to convince city halls to do this?
yeah, so it's sometimes difficult to convince your legislators or to do a ballot measure to get the state to pass something statewide in one shot, right? And so what happens is it's lots of stuff like we're doing with FairVote Illinois, um, just educating the public, saying this is how ranked choice voting works. It's really straightforward. It's showing great results. Let's try it here in this city, and getting a city on board. It's much more likely to pass through that way. So Maine was able to do it statewide. Great. Alaska, for lots of reasons. They also have a very high independent count, but they're a Republican, leaning state. It's awesome that they got it through statewide. Most other states are doing this approach of let's pass it where we can. We want it everywhere. We want it at the local level, state level, national level. So if we could get it first at a city level, great. Let's pass it there. Show that make everyone comfortable that it works. Make sure everyone understands how it works, and then pass it at the state next.
And there are folks who are messaging or commenting that they just had, there were a lot of local elections recently. Diane says that her community has 30,000 registered voters and only 2,000 came out to vote. And people, again, don't necessarily place a lot of value on the legislators and the electeds who often have the most direct impact on their daily lives.
Yeah. I mean, yes, exactly. Right. And so it's funny because there's this sort of loss of faith in the voting system. And we're so proud in this country of being a democracy and the way we vote. It's somewhat scary to have this loss of faith that, well, it doesn't really matter, right? Especially at the local level and things. And that's where it really does make a big difference. That's where the local laws are and rules are really what make an impact in many people's lives. So it would be great to fix that as well. And I think we are seeing higher voter turnout in places that use ranked choice voting. And I think even over time, we'll see even higher voter turnout yet, because I think it changes that dynamic of, wait a second, my vote matters and my representatives are representing me.
It's responsive voting.
Exactly.
You have a responsive government. So, you mentioned that Maine and Alaska and a lot of these municipalities have a large portion of independent voters. Not necessarily true in Illinois. We are pretty distinct. Chicago is a pretty blue city. The rest of the state is very red. And I saw that it seems like most of the folks that have signed on that were named in the piece that I read were all Democrats. How are Republicans responding to FairVote in Illinois?
Yeah, so we're a bipartisan or nonpartisan
right.
Organization, and we have support from both sides.
Okay.
We tend to have more supporters right now in Chicago area. That's where our group started, and Chicago tends to be more Democrat, so we therefore have more Democrat supporters at the moment. But I don't think there's anything like within ranked choice voting itself that makes that, the way it should play out. In fact, there's a lot of reason to believe that the right will support ranked choice voting just as much as the left. I know in Indiana, the Republican Party uses ranked choice voting within their state convention. They do this. They do the same thing in Utah within the state convention. They use ranked choice voting. It's really a nonpartisan issue. It just ensures that whoever's the most preferred candidate, or helps ensure that whoever's the most preferred candidate, is the one who actually gets elected.
And in Illinois, we have to declare a party when we vote in the primaries. And that's something else that I think can be restrictive when it comes to having your voice heard, isn't it?
Yeah. So at FairVote Illinois, we're advocating for ranked choice voting. Alaska is doing something interesting. They have a form of ranked choice voting combined with what I call public primary. So it's a nonpartisan open primary. And similar in many ways to what we do. If you want to call the mayor of Chicago a primary, it'd be an open, nonpartisan, or what I call a public primary. And so in Alaska, the top 4 move forward to a general. And then in the general, you use ranked choice voting. So it's a way to, it would be, that's another flavor which would kind of tackle that problem of restrictive. Right now, Illinois has very restrictive ballot access for candidates. It's hard to get, hard for a candidate to get on the ballot if you're not one of the dominant parties.
The chosen ones.
Yeah.
Well, and because of that, and you mentioned spoiler candidates, when an incumbent or somebody in power wants to split the vote and be the simple majority rather than the 50+1, there's a lot of shenanigans. Let's put it that way.
Yep.
There's a lot of shenanigans that ensue. And, it seems to me that, because people don't always want to just vote for Democrats or just Republicans. And you mentioned that primaries are now the elections and often in many situations. And and because of that, that's where all the money is put. That's where all the efforts, when you see negative campaigning or heavy ads, and then it comes to the general and people don't even bother with they're like, they're presumptive, aren't they?
Yeah, I'm in a district in Chicago, and I know that whoever runs in the General Assembly will probably run uncontested in the general.
Exactly.
Right. And so, yeah, the primary is the election, right? And obviously so, because there is no, there's no other candidate in the general.
Yep.
So yeah, there are ways of addressing this. One is, okay, we can make the primaries themselves. You have ranked choice voting there because that's where the election's basically being run and won, which is the way the Senate bill is being amended now to include ranked choice voting in the primaries. The other option is more of what Alaska does, where let's have this open or public primary, and then top four, regardless of party, you could have 2 Republicans, a Democrat, and a Green, or you could have 3 Dems and a Libertarian. Great, right? Whoever's top 4, top 5 is done in some other places. Let them run, and then we rank them, and then the top one out of those choices is the winner.
And what are you hearing from people? Because I know that you do phone banking to, right now people calling their own circles and talking about it, trying to broaden that, the scope of who knows about this, that it's even a possibility in Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of conversations are you having with folks who don't even aren't familiar with this? Are they excited?
Yeah. So overwhelmingly, when we talk to people and they hear about how it works, they kind of go like, oh, duh, like why are we not doing this? Like what, right? We have, there's not a whole lot of opposition, and the opposition that we do, that if we ever do hear any, is usually misinformation a little bit. So it's usually, as I think I mentioned in the beginning, that it's too complicated, but we're like, well, it really isn't, right? I have little nieces and nephews, and they could tell me their favorite ice cream flavors, first choice, second choice, third choice down the list, right? And that's all it is.
I'll have mint chip. That's fine.
Yeah.
I'll still be happy.
Exactly, right? And so it's like ranking things is very easy. This has been done in elementary schools just to prove it out as well, which is super cool.
Well, like student councils, you mean?
There were some tests done in, I guess, more middle school, 7th grade, and it was voting. It was just an experiment done by the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center, and they basically did it for a holiday season. So it was best Christmas movies, best Christmas treats, Christmas songs, things of that nature, and they were just see how easy it was with very little instruction. These middle schoolers could vote on these things, and
see, everybody,
lo and behold,
yeah,
it was really easy, right? And so it was really cool to see that little experiment. And so yeah, as we talk to people and we have these conversations, it's overwhelmingly support. It's just that, unfortunately, it's not known by a large part of the country and state, and even elected officials sometimes haven't heard of ranked choice voting. So just getting the word out is huge, and having these conversations it's just a lot of work, because you have to go out and do a lot of one-on-ones and have these conversations. And this conversation is amazing because for that same purpose. But yeah, overwhelmingly people are very, very receptive.
And what can people do if let's say they're watching and they're like, you know what, I want to get involved. How do I explain this? I mean, I know that you have been, and we've talked for 40 minutes, and some people are kind of joining us. And because I know Mike Baker just joined us, because he said that the reason for low turnout is lack of faith in Illinois legislators, local politics. Absolutely. We've been talking about that. And, but I'm sure that there are people, look, we've seen in legislatures across the country that there are over 250 bills that are dealing with elections and how we vote. And there's a lot of argument over that. And, I know where I stand on that. We won't get into where we are politically on it. But we see people like Stacey Abrams who are trying to educate, register voters, doing all of that grassroots effort. And I think that sometimes people don't really know how to get involved. So how do they get involved if they want to join the work that you're doing?
Yeah. So the easiest thing to do, right, is for us, we say go to fairvoteillinois.org. There's a link to sign up. Click that link. Click the volunteer link, even better. And then if you click the volunteer link, you will get a phone call from one of us to say,
yes, you will.
hey,
That's how we're
yes,
here.
we'll have someone who will text you or call you and say, these are ways you could get involved. And then once you get involved, one thing that we ask all volunteers is to become a good advocate. So learn how to really, it only takes a couple minutes, but learn how to speak about ranked choice voting, right? And for the most part, it's let's keep it simple, right? And because it is really simple, right? You rank your candidates, first choice, second choice, third choice, down the list, any order you like. In order for someone to win, they have to get a majority, 50% plus one. And then, you could go over a little bit of how the votes are allocated if you want, but and you could relate it to the voter's experience, right? So oftentimes you could ask somebody like, have you or someone ever had to decide who you vote for, either a candidate that you really like versus who you think has a better chance of winning, right?
Yeah.
And it's so really disturbing that almost always people relate to this, and it's like, well, that shouldn't be the case. You should be able to vote for whoever you like, your preferred candidate. You put the one next to their name, and even if you think they have no shot, okay, fine, your vote's will likely go to your next choice anyway, right? But you get to voice that opinion, and you don't need to play a strategy game. So I'm just getting volunteers to become good advocates is something we ask of everybody. And then there's plenty of ways to get involved when you have that phone call with one of our volunteers. We have so many things going on in parallel. We're active on social media. We're producing videos and content. We have an arts and graphics. We're meeting with our legislators. So a lot of policy and research. We give talks. So yeah, lots of ways to get involved.
I'm guessing calling your legislator's office and finding out where they stand on ranked choice voting helps too.
Oh, absolutely. And right now is particularly, we're pushing for that. Bill 1785, the Senate bill. We're hoping that to get some more co-sponsors on it so that it comes into a committee vote and makes it out of committee. And that's the bill that's being amended to include presidential elections and primaries.
When we spoke, and I joined one of the volunteer sessions, and I had to jump off because my neighborhood group, Jefferson Park Forward, was having Mike Quigley on, and he apparently is somebody who also supports ranked choice voting.
Oh, that's great. I mean,
yeah, I was I've asked him. He did say his office would contact me, and I have yet to hear back, but I shall circle back and tell them, because I think that the more high profile people that you have, the easier it is to spread the word. If he just tweets about it even once a month to elevate that message, it makes a difference.
Oh, absolutely. And we have to pursue all these avenues to just get the word out, right? So not everybody sees a tweet. Not everyone sees a Facebook ad. Not everyone sees an ad in a paper or an article in a paper, letter to the editor or op-ed, but different groups see each of those. So we're really pursuing all of them at once because we want to reach as many people as possible.
You and I are clearly nerds when it comes to elections.
Yeah.
This conversation going, oh, I wonder if they ever think about elections. And it's been since I was a kid. My dad was a precinct captain. And this actually fits in with what we're talking about, because I found it very hard running for office and sort of having to be strident about certain things. What I would often tell people, you knock on a door and somebody says, I'm a Republican. Are you? If you like, it's scary when they ask you, what party are you? And I'm like, I'm running as a Democrat, and I am a Democrat, and I have been for as long as I can remember. And not just because my dad was a Republican and I always knew he was wrong. But what I'm saying is that even though that's been my party, I would always tell people at the door, look, my dad was a lifelong Republican. I would never want him to feel left out of the process. And the way the system is set up now, that's almost impossible for people to say that that's how they conduct themselves as legislators. They are beholden to these special interests and to their party, aren't they?
Yeah. It's funny you brought that story too about just canvassing and knocking on doors, because we had volunteers from Maine who who told the story of when they went and they were knocking on doors for the candidate. They have ranked choice voting, so sometimes you would see the yard sign and it's the opposing candidate, And so you pass up that house. You're like,
No,
they have a
ever.
yard sign.
Those are the ones I definitely go to. Go ahead.
But yeah, with ranked choice, especially with ranked choice voting, they're like, wait, no, there's no reason not to knock on that door and have the conversation and say,
Yes.
hey, I realize like you have a yard sign. We're likely not going to change your vote, right? However, like let's talk about what you're interested in, why you vote the way you do. And you might see that there's a lot of alignment, and hopefully you can make our candidate your second choice.
And that makes sense because that connection is important. The reason that we fight so much is there's these assumptions about other parties. We use like these broader language, this you're a fascist or you're a communist. There's no room for even having a conversation anymore. And that's in part because of social media, but it is decades of, having control over the way elections are run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, okay, so we can so go to the website to learn how to volunteer. There are, call your legislators. I know that somebody has shared the link and said call your senators, but also call your representatives. And you're working on this at the state level. Is there a push for more cities in Illinois, or is the ultimate goal to have it for the statewide elections first and then the presidential?
Yeah, so we're pursuing a lot of things in parallel. So definitely at the state level, we have these bills in the House and the Senate. There is an alderman in Chicago who's very interested in getting ranked choice voting in Chicago because it just makes sense. And if we could, there's this other benefit that he really loves, and that if we could eliminate a runoff election, we could just save the city some cash, which is.
Did I see the number at 200 million for that runoff with Preckwinkle and Lightfoot?
Oh no, it's more on the order of like 3 million or so.
Good. I was like,
so it's not, yeah. So even which is
that's big.
Yeah, that's still that there's a lot we could do with an extra, extra few $1 million every 4 years. So there's a push at the municipal level, and we're pursuing a couple avenues there, both changing the law to make, or the state law to make it a little bit easier for municipalities to pass ranked choice voting, and to advocate at the local level. So Evanston is a great possibility that they have. It's a progressive sort of, as far as reform goes, city. They have Daniel Biss as the new mayor, who's a big ranked choice voting advocate and right, very much favorable for this. Chicago, in order to pass at the city level today, you need a referendum. So it needs to come to a vote, and the people will say yes, no on it. And so we might be able to make that a little bit easier by saying, yes, that's an option, but another option is for city council to pass it. And then that would make it easier in Chicago, at least, because it's a lot of outreach and effort to get to get that vote going in such a big city. But we're pursuing all those things.
If you have one alderman, so you got 49 to go, again, this goes to alderperson. This goes to people calling the offices, their alderman's office, and saying, hey, where do you stand? Asking, or emailing and saying that this is something that you believe in and would like to know where they stand.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we do suspect that there are many other aldermen who also voice support of ranked choice voting, but we have one sponsor.
Why wouldn't they be vocal about it, or you just haven't had a chance to talk?
We're reaching out. So and the League of Women Voters is they're on board with ranked choice voting nationally. They endorse the Fair Representation Act, which is a form of ranked choice voting for multi-member districts, which is really cool. That's great. In Illinois, I don't know if they formally endorse ranked choice voting yet, but they likely will. They're doing interviews with the aldermen, which are super cool, because one of the questions they ask is about different reforms, including gerrymandering, but ranked choice voting in particular are what we care about. And so they're getting having these conversations is great, and having support of League of Women Voters is great.
Okay, so folks need to go to the website, go to fairvoteillinois.org. Is that right? I see it's in fairvoteillinois.org, and the link there gives you the option to call your senators. And look, if you're not ready to volunteer and commit some time, and it's not that much time, you guys have, I know that you have a phone banking once a month, And and Zoom has actually changed a lot of how we do this too. Has that been helpful in spreading the word?
Yes. So one of the ways we're doing outreach right now is we try to, any organization that, whether you're a political organization or you're whatever, your union, teachers organization, it doesn't matter. As long as there's enough ears and interest, we're willing to talk. And giving these presentations on Zoom is really makes it a lot easier in many ways. It's kind of connecting us to a lot of people that would, we might not be able to connect with quite as easily.
Okay.
So that's an option too. So if anyone who's listening is part of another organization and they want to hear from us, we'll do our 15, 20-minute ranked choice voting presentation and explain what it is, how it works, how you could get involved.
Well, I know of a couple neighborhood groups, and I would love to continue spreading the word. And so, okay, the SB 1785 is with Representative Jaime Andrade. And so, what?
Yeah, that one's in the Senate. That's with Senator Laura Murphy.
Okay, so what happens next? Because sometimes these bills, they go through committee hearings, and maybe they don't make it out of committee, or they make it to committee hearing and they don't go for a vote. What are you hearing from Senator Murphy?
Yeah, so right now it's in this executive committee, which is kind of where bills go, where there's where they're not sure what to do with them just yet, or it might be because they're controversial. But for the ranked choice voting, when there wasn't a new committee, it was an ethics and elections committee, and they're kind of deciding what that means. And so, or at least on the House side there was, so I'm imagining it's the same in the Senate. And so they're trying to figure out, what committee this bill belongs to. And so the next step would be moving that bill to a committee, and it may have already been moved, right? Because this is happening pretty fast now.
Right.
And then at that point, having a vote to get it out of committee. And so getting some co-sponsors on the bill is a great thing. This bill existed in the last session and had Senator Murphy plus 8 additional co-sponsors on the bill. And so there's definitely some support, at least in the Senate. And we suspect that there will be at least the same support. We expect it to be much more greater now, especially with the addition of primaries when that gets added.
Well, I'd love to catch up with you again once, and I'll reach out to Senator Murphy. I'm curious to find out who the other members of the executive committee are. And folks, again, we don't often know what committees our legislators are on, and those are important roles that they have, because they make those decisions of what makes it out, what direction it goes in, what kind of energy is put behind it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And
then I guess.
Yeah.
I was going to say one other thing that I didn't mention that people could do is just, if you're watching this, you're on Facebook, like us on Facebook and share content. That goes a long way, because like I said, we need all these different avenues for reaching people. And some people are, social media is where they get their news, where they get information. So just getting eyeballs on the issue is enormously helpful. So Facebook, we're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We have a YouTube channel as well, so check us out on there.
So that's a great way to start a conversation on your page. If you're the kind of person that goes, what do you think of this article? Share it on your Facebook page or on Twitter. Hey, have you guys heard of ranked choice voting? Check this out. Or, what are your thoughts? Or, is it time for a change? And somebody commented on that article in Chicago Magazine. And I love that people are like this. It's an opinion piece, actually, now that I'm reading through it. It was kind of a take on it, but folks are saying, like, were we ready for women to vote? Were we ready for civil rights, to broaden access to voting? We may not, being ready isn't necessary for change. That it's something that is necessary for people to feel like their voices are heard. I'm so grateful for your time. Was there anything else? Because I know people make lists sometimes, or like, make sure you talk about this, or anybody from FairVote Illinois that might be messaging you. Is there anything that you want to make sure you touch on?
I haven't even been checking my phone or so I hope no one's egging me to say this.
Don't forget this. Well, let me try that then. Go ahead.
I guess I'll just, FairVote Illinois is an all volunteer organization. The other thing, the one last thing you do always is make a donation. Money goes a long way in an organization like ours, because we're first of all, no one's getting paid. So we stretched every dollar we have. And it really helps to get the word out. We could have much more print materials. We could boost stuff on social media occasionally. And as part of building this movement. So if nothing else, yeah, please consider making a donation as well. But yeah, and then since we're an all volunteer organization, we have such an incredible team of people. So, I'm the one talking to you, but it's a massive amount of people who dedicate a tremendous amount of time. So thank you to everybody.
Excellent. We've been talking to Andrew Szilva, who is sorry, I put the Z in there. So I added it. He's the executive director of FairVote, Illinois. What neighborhood do you live in? Are you in the city or in the suburbs?
I'm in the city. I'm in Lakeview.
Lakeview. Okay, then this will end on when things open up. If you could rent out any restaurant, I'm throwing a curveball.
Okay.
If you could rent out any restaurant to take all your friends and family to, where are you taking us for your favorite meal?
Oh, so I moved to Lakeview just last August.
And during the pandemic.
During the pandemic. Yeah, exactly. And so I haven't been out much, but I've been ordering takeout just occasionally from MFK. It's a tiny little space. It's tiny, so I don't know if I'm taking all my friends there because probably only sits 20 people or something.
Okay.
But their food is so incredible, and as far as like the best meals I've had during the takeout have been takeout from MFK. So, and it's only a couple blocks away.
Food. I'm on their website right now.
Yeah, small plates. I don't know how to classify it. They say Mediterranean, kind of. It's just really good food.
I've never heard of MFK. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm always excited to find a new joint in Chicago.
Okay, well, I'm glad I could give them a shout out because they're really incredible.
MFK, you can go to their website. It's mfkrestaurant.com. And that's M as in Mary, F as in Frank, K as in kitchen. Thank you so much for that, Andrew. What a great conversation. I look forward to having you back. Again, everyone go to fairvoteillinois.org. Share this conversation on your Facebook page as well. I know it's a little bit of a long one, but I wanted to get to know you, and I promise that we'll be able to condense it a little bit. I wanted to kind of stretch out a little. So thank you so much for joining our coffee break today. Thank you so much. And I think next week we're going to have the owner of Rep Chai, but I will keep everybody posted on that. And I know that there were some leaders watching this conversation today, so I'm hoping that they will invite you to speak for their groups as well. So I'm gonna connect you to some folks.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Care. Bye, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. We'll see you next week. Thank you.